got an idea, you've got a medical practice, you've got patients who come in and out, but that thing that you want to do called concierge medicine, there's a learning curve to it. Do you want to accept insurance? Do you want to participate in Medicare? Do you want to do a hybrid practice? What's your staff going to look like? Are you going to incorporate different tests inside of the office? And if you're interested in me speaking a little bit of truth to you, and sometimes it's not as easy as we think. We want somebody, I know, we want somebody to just say, oh yeah, you can do this right away. It'll take you like a week. Sometimes we don't really want to hear that. There's the learning curve to this. And the speakers that you're going to hear, the presentations and courses that you have access to within this community are here designed especially for you. Please go check them out. So our next guest here at the Concierge Medicine Forum is a special friend, a unique physician, and really a special and unique story. Dr. Ken Redcross, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here, especially to be here with so many people that think the same and are all focused on the same thing, the patient. And I love being a part of it. So thanks for having me on today, Michael.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And you are not only a physician, but you are kind of a mobile physician, and you're a top doctor in concierge medicine, and you have kind of your communications expert. And so your story is so unique to so many of us. And I know that many of the physicians who are going to be listening to this, whether it's live or on the replay, will be certainly reaching out to you. And you're the founding physician of Ken Redcross, and you can go to drkenredcross.com, but also Red Cross Communication, Dr. Ken Redcross Communications. And let's talk a little bit about how you became a physician, because for a lot of people, a lot of physicians, it's a family story. My dad was this, my mom was a nurse, whatever. So talk to us a little bit about how you got interested in healthcare overall.
Well, let me share a little part, guys. So look, there is no other Dr. Redcross from where I came through. So I was very fortunate and blessed to be the first doctor in my family, guys. Like so many of us probably watching or listening, look, I always had a love for biology, for health. When I first started, I adore animals. I have 6, just to let you know how much I love animals. But, you know, it was that personal touch with people when I realized, look, I adore patients. I adore those who I come in contact with each and every day. And so I realized that even at a young age, you know, I thought I had a little something different as far as the way I communicated and really just the empathy I feel. I really feel what my patients are going through. And so it's something that has really resonated with kind of what I do and how I practice. So I knew over time, Michael, that I wanted to do something to impact change and impact people. But even when I was younger, I didn't realize that it would be as a physician, because once again, I didn't really have any role models. I mean, I had beautiful mom and dad, but I mean, role models within the healthcare industry to say, you know, I can do that. And so, like I said, I was very blessed for me to kind of go that direction and be able to do what I do.
Wow. And our guest is Ken Redcross, and Dr. Ken Redcross. And so what was the journey like for you moving into the discovery of, like, you know, I think medicine is right for me, or, you know, maybe a business world, because you speak well on camera. You're an on-camera expert. You know I'm a communications guy, so I was a communications major in college, and I went to school to be a pastor. And then I shortly realized none of these guys know how to communicate with an audience. And so I went into communication. So what drew you into, you know, healthcare as a medicine? And then was like, you know, I'm pretty good behind camera too.
Well, you know what, guys? So look, let me tell you this. It's interesting. So when I was in, I went to school down in Virginia. And when I was in school there, I realized I was a biology major. You know, my GPA was like 4.8. It was a lot of my colleagues, and they were pre-pharmacy, pre-dentistry. I love biology. And once again, don't forget, I didn't think about the medical thing because I didn't realize that was necessarily possible. So I realized, like, dang, you know, my grades are just as good as theirs. And I started down that medical school path because I knew I loved biology, and I knew I just love people, and I wanted to put that together. So at the time, I'll never forget, I was living in the frat house, and I remember getting all my information together to send to the medical school. And then one day I'm in the frat house and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get this letter of acceptance.
Wow.
And I'm like, I called my mom as an only child. I called my mom and say, Mom, I think I'm going to medical school, you know. And from there, it was just the many blessings that came with that, guys, because what I ended up doing is that I knew at that point, obviously, over the journey, and even to this day, I continue to recognize each and every day of why I was created, of why I was supposed to be here. And I know that each and every day that I interact with a patient. In fact, I just interacted with a patient almost 30 minutes ago who needed to call me because she couldn't find a doctor and she can't feel half of her face. And I tried to help her figure out where she needs to go. And I already know what's probably going on. But the point is, there's not a day when I don't impact somebody's life, Michael. And that's my goal. That's what I know my calling is. And so as I kind of look at my story, when I ended up going, I was in Virginia, and I ended up getting a scholarship with the National Health Service Corps. And if any of you are not necessarily familiar with that, you know, that is when you're going to work in an underserved area in order to kind of trade your medical school cost or education. And once again, I didn't necessarily come from money. So from something like this, it was a perfect balance, because I knew I wanted to help an underserved population. But how do I do that and make sure that I can do that through my education? And so what I ended up doing after I graduated from medical school is I knew where I wanted to go to my residency, and I trained up in New York at Columbia. And that's a good story behind that I'll share. But the point is that National Health Service Corps allowed me to get my first position working with migrant Mexican farm workers in Oxnard, California. Now, I had worked in El Yunque when I knew I loved biology. El Yunque is in Puerto Rico. It is the rainforest. And I had already had some comfortability with speaking Spanish. I love the language. It's a hobby even to this day when I interact in Spanish a lot. And hopefully soon in the media that way as well, which is fun. But the point is that that's where my first building block started with, once again, the humanitarian part of what I do. And about understanding patients and differences. This is all the way, as they say in California, on the left coast. The world is different. People are different. And I learned so much from being there. And also before then, working in Harlem Hospital, before I was even in medical school, to see once again another population that needed service and that was kind of left out of the healthcare diaspora in a sense. Or the healthcare world, I should say better. So, you know, each one of my stops, I was able to learn people and able to learn communication. And once again, to be able to feel what they go through because of the empathy part. Now, the funny part, Michael, is that people say, well, okay, Dr. Redcross, you worked in El Yunque in the rainforest. And I recently went to Guatemala before we were dealing with the virus. And then you say, well, where does Beverly Hills come into all this? Because when I was working there in Oxnard, don't forget that those in Beverly Hills and those sort of areas need support too. Some would argue maybe a little more in different ways, not necessarily financially. But the point is that I realized that there was a way that I could kind of cover everybody, Michael, and be able to do that. And be able to do what my goal really, really, truly is. And that's the one thing, as I like to say, change lives, impact lives. And so, you know, my career has kind of gone in an interesting way when it was so heavy as far as in medicine, and then going out to Los Angeles is where the media career really started to grow.
And let's talk about a little bit of that, because, you know, it seems as though every interview we have with physicians, the benevolence, the humanitarian efforts is such an ingrained love. It's just embedded in your DNA, you know, to use a clinical term. We've been talking a lot about precision medicine lately, but it's ingrained in a physician's DNA to have that empathy, that humanitarian benevolence to help the underserved, the underprivileged, and then to reverse that over to concierge medicine. You know, it almost seems like it's one speaker, one physician said, you know, we have been so morally injured, you know, as physicians. And, you know, talk to us a little bit about, you know, your move into the media, your move into the spotlight, on camera, behind the camera, in front of the camera. You know, that's an area where not a lot of physicians feel comfortable. They're much more comfortable inside the closed door exam room.
Yeah.
But we need physicians in front of the camera to, and lighten things up, explain things in a deeper way, in a lighter hearted way. So talk to us a little bit about how you moved into that role.
So guys, back in 2007, that's when I finished up when I was in Oxnard, California. I ended up going to Cedars, and that was in Beverly Hills. And what ended up happening, guys, is that I had an assistant to one of these big executives at Universal Studios. He was doing a movie. Once again, this is 2007. He was sick, and he was driving her crazy because she was like, oh my God, he's sick, but he can't be seen right now. He's got to finish this movie. And it was at the end of the day. And I told her, I said, you know what? Why don't you tell him that I'll come see him after I'm done? She said, what? 2007, guys, okay? So I was like, yeah, tell him I'll come see him. And sure enough, she got me onto the site at Universal Studios. All I went out there with, everyone, was a prescription pad and a stethoscope. And I'm going there. She gets me on the lot of Universal. I walk through all of the production assistants and everybody, and everyone's looking at this guy walk by with this stethoscope. I go in, I see the patient, typical like alpha male guy. Like, I already know what I have, doc. I just have a little upper respiratory infection. I just need an antibiotic, whatever. So I went there, I saw him, but there were some things that happened. Well, number one, he said, so how much do I owe you? And I said, $100? And he says, what, $100? So he writes me this big check. So two things happened at that moment. Forget about the money. But the thing that made me really, really happy, number one, I loved being there, as I like to say, everyone, into the soul of the patient. I loved that close relationship that I just garnered with him for 15 to 20 minutes. The second thing that I loved about that, Michael, is I made him happy. I made him so happy. And for me, once again, don't forget my mission. I wrote a book called Bond because I love that patient, Dr. Bond. And I was able to get that in that 15 to 20 minutes. And so in 2007, that's when I realized, like, you know what? This is a model. This is a business model where people will pay for access, convenience, and my time. And that I could monetize that and not be within a group setting. Now, in doing that in Beverly Hills, what started to happen is that throughout some of the television world, I was the only young African-American kind of internist back then in the Beverly Hills area. And there was someone that came off of one of the big TV shows and came in, and he was not necessarily African-American, but I bring that up in the sense that a lot of people in the community were proud. They really wanted to support. And so one of these persons off these big shows came in. I didn't recognize him. I'm not the biggest TV guy as far as watching it. I don't even watch myself most times, Michael, but I'll tell you, they came in. He was really happy that I didn't care. To me, he's just a soul. He's a patient. And then word of mouth started. And then as word of mouth started, all of a sudden producers started to call me. And they asked me, they said, I used to do Entertainment Tonight. And when Entertainment Tonight would come in, they talk about some of the stars and what they go through. And it's like, Doc, you mind giving us an opinion? And to me, don't forget, everyone, if I really wanted to impact souls, I couldn't impact as many souls as I think I was put here on this earth to do within four walls. I just felt that I had to do more for humanity, for more people than just my four walls. And I realized by doing Entertainment Tonight or The Insider and all these shows that I'm impacting so many souls each and every day. And the way I look at it, Michael, is that for that 3-minute segment, you're one of my patients. And I want you to leave there happier than when you were before you met me. And I want you to leave educated more than you were before you met me. And so I started to really be able to build a base. After a while, they started to recognize that one of my, once again, blessings or gifts is that I do my best to break these things down that we all know in our medical field, but I try to put them in little digestible pieces. And I try to put them in digestible pieces so that we're educating our patients as well, and that they're leaving empowered. And if I figured if I could do that for patients, whether I do it, I kind of have, you mentioned, so I have my concierge portion, which is my medical arm. And then I have a media arm of what I do, which is Redcross Communications. And I almost think of it as, MMA is very popular to a lot of people now. And that's kind of an acronym I use in my mind because we try to fight to stay healthy. And it tends to be the medical portion, the media portion, and then the A is the alternative portion. And what I mean by that, guys, is that what we've all seen throughout healthcare is that you have a group of people who actually look at alternative ways of healing. That was the way I started to develop. I trained in Colombia, so I bleed Colombia blue forever. But when I went to California, I started to learn a lot about alternative ways of healing, that people were getting better without my prescription pad. So now my whole practice is very unique, everyone, in that my whole goal is not to have to write a prescription if not necessary. Obviously, there's some disease states where you have to, but what about some of these other alternatives of healing and getting well? The spirituality, not religious. I'm talking about meditation. I'm talking about time for you, making sure that we're managing the S word. I'll call it this time. I say stress. I don't ever say the word stress. I call it the S word because I don't give it any power. And so that's kind of the way that I manage my practice, focusing on MMA, the medical portion, the media portion of what I do, and the alternative things that we can offer patients to once again make them healthy and happy. And so as I do a lot of these different TV shows and spaces, guys, it's so interesting because I wasn't joking. I don't typically even watch myself because it's not about me. It's never about me as far as I'm concerned. It's about all of you right now watching this or listening. And then when there's an audience, it's about them as well. And so it allows me to be able to focus on, once again, what I know my mission is and what my passion is, why I'm fortunate enough to be on this earth for hopefully some more years, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
It's easier to do.
Well, and we were talking with a physician from a concierge physician colleague of yours.
Let the notes flow like a symphony. Now I can say things differently.
To be on this earth for hopefully some more years, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
It's easier to do.
Well, and we were talking with a physician from a concierge physician colleague of yours. She's in Arizona, and she said, I struggle with being the truthful part and the helpful part inside of the exam room because I can bear truth all day long. Here's the results. Here's what your blood pressure is high, your HDL, your LDL's here. Those things are all truthful.
Sure.
But at some point, I'm just wishing that they get into better health. I'm just wishing that they do exercise. Those are all wishes. So what can I do to be helpful? And so that's one of the beauties of what the concierge medicine model allows physicians to do, is to create that healthier, remarkable relationship that actually, so many physicians talk about when we ask them, how do you get new patients, market and grow? It's, well, patient referrals, word of mouth. And well, word of mouth has to start somewhere. And usually in medicine today, when we think of going to the doctor, like the executive assistant you mentioned, that story was like, really? You're going to come here? Like, I'm not used to that. Like, that never happens. That's an unremarkable expectation that most patients, as I always say, I'm not a physician, but I am a patient, so I know what it's like to sit on the other side of you. And there's not a lot to be remarkable. There's not a lot remarkable happening inside of the exam room that's worth remarking positively about. It's usually, well, you think your story, Aunt so-and-so, was bad? Let me tell you about mine. And so I love that you wrote a book called Bond, because that's one of the reasons we're talking with Dr. Ken Redcross today. Is you go to drkenredcross.com. But tell us a little bit about the outline, the inspiration behind your book, Bond, and we'll put the links above and below as well.
Sure, guys. So, one of the things that as I mentioned that was important to me, because this is such a passion of mine, each and everything that I think about, everyone, and even these opportunities, I got called for 2 different opportunities yesterday, and I have to think about them. Are they a part of that mission? Those 3 things that I told you about, whether it be the MMA. So it takes me back to why I wrote the book a couple of years ago now, because for me, I looked at, what are the things that allow me to make sure that I give patients everything they deserve and make them happy, because I love what I do so much. And it was four things. It was to make sure that there was trust, respect, empathy, and communication. And I realized, Michael, that if I was able to have that kind of relationship with patients, or if patients were able to get that from their doctors all around the United States or the world, because I have patients all over the world and all nearby in different facets, if they could get that relationship with their doctor, that creates what I call a patient nirvana. Everyone is happy, healthy, and that's why I always sign my signature in health and happiness, because those are the tenets of life and the patient-doctor relationship in my eyes. And so I needed to kind of get that philosophy out on paper. And the funny thing, guys, look, I'm not a writer typically. I'm a talker, if you can't tell. But once again, I needed to kind of have my tenets of how to make patients happy and healthy. I needed to have it on paper. I needed to be able to spill my soul as well and share that. Interesting about what I do in healthcare is that I never ever have a day that's the same. And I need that. I feed off of that. And concierge medicine allows me to do that. Whether I'm getting ready to, which I'm going to do in a couple of hours, hop in the car and make a quick house call. Whether that's if, someone needed me to travel with them, whether a person needed me to check on mom or check on dad a bit in another area or from afar by the telephone, whatever that is, guys, think about that. I'm literally that example of someone who feels like I am not working at all. I'm living out my calling. And so that's what concierge medicine is for me. Now, back to one little piece that we talked about, so Dr. Redcross, you're dealing with all wealthy patients and so forth. And that's not necessarily true. The patient that I told you about that needed to talk about some neurologic manifestations. Look, I do a lot of things pro bono. I only because that balance is so important for me. I keep my practice, it's very niche-y, it's very small, but it allows me to provide high quality care that way. And because of that, I can have time to do some pro bono stuff. I can have time to lend my expertise or the things that I'm fortunate enough to share. So that's why it was so important for me to write Bond, because even when I go through it and I talk about it again and again, it's a constant reminder to me that once again, it is not about me. It's about all of them and all of you. And it's not just the wealthy that necessarily deserves this sort of care. And we can figure out ways to balance what we do. It doesn't have to be elitist. And I think that's the big thing that we all have to fight, right? When you're talking about a retainer model or how are you going to come up with that sort of money? You can work on some things that allow you to be all encompassing and still allow concierge medicine to continue to grow just like it is.
Absolutely. And our guest is author and physician, an entrepreneur, a docpreneur, Dr. Ken Redcross. You can go to drkenredcross.com. We'll also put the link to Bond in the book there. We highly recommend that you check that out. We're twice a year, we put together a recommended reading list for physicians. And one of the books that we'll make sure to include on that list is your book, Bond. This year for the Christmas season and in January as well. And so for physicians and spouses and them watching, they're probably thinking, well, he seems so happy. That's very different from what I'm experiencing. I'm not happy as a physician right now, or I see that as us, because we see a lot of spouses come to and watch these conferences and these sessions as my husband or my wife is not happy as a physician these days. You don't have a brick and mortar office. You're a little bit of a unique animal out there where you're driving to different places. You don't have a brick and mortar office. So tell us a little bit about how that works. How do you stay focused? How do you make referrals to specialists? What's the network look like that you also utilize?
So one thing that's unique is, so that brick and mortar office that I have /had, it's still there as far as just just because I think it's kind of hard for a physician. I've been in practice almost 20 years, guys, and it's hard to kind of let certain things go. But you're right, I'm totally mobile and able to get to patients that way. Look, my referral base is, once again, I'm very fortunate. You know, I just as I adore patients, I love dealing with my colleagues and ones who are also like-minded, and that are focused on the patient first. So therefore, I have a lot of friends all around, whether I have to call somewhere in California or someone down in Florida or even Atlanta recently, where I'm able to kind of use my tentacles through the media world or what have you, to be able to reach out and do my best to provide those referrals that are necessary for so many people. So, you know, I've been fortunate enough to build a nice network of once again, like-minded people who focus on the patient first. And so it's been one of those things that's kind of cool to be able to, you know, to call on some colleagues and kind of know that everything is okay. You know, another good story. I was called earlier this week about a patient. He's a music producer. He was in another country. His family was there, though, here in New York, actually. And he was concerned about COVID because his small son ended up having a cousin or someone in the class who was positive with COVID. What do you do with that? He's in another country and he's terrified. Got my name through different channels. A lot of my stuff is word of mouth for the most part, everyone. And so he called me, wanted me to go check out the wife and the child. Now, as you guys know, I'm an internist, and so that's not my purview to go there. I'm a doc, of course, and I could probably be fine, but that's not what we should do. So once again, through my network, I was able to figure out a pediatric concierge doctor who's able to say, Ken, I got you. I got it. And that's the way our network can be. And how beautiful is that? Now, one other thing I should say too, for that wife or that husband or that spouse that sees how their husband or wife are going through these things. Look, I'm kind of happy at baseline. I don't believe in negativity or sorrow. But not only that, guys, it's important for me to be honest with everyone out there. Look, I haven't always felt that way inside when I was in that employed model. When I was in that model, they didn't allow me to understand what concierge medicine would do for me. It's not about what concierge medicine does for me financially, it's what it does for me spiritually, and what it does for me as far as my health and my happiness. And so I've been there, like a lot of you who may still be out there struggling. So I don't profess to pretend that it was necessarily an easy story, but I can tell you my happiness meter has gone through the roof since I realized that concierge medicine was the way for me. It gives you your control of your life back. You actually eat lunch and don't skip lunch and skip those things that are important for you. So look, when you get into that concierge space and understand, look, it's not about the finances. You know, when you think about your health and happiness, you can have some of the wealthiest people in the world. We always hear it. They're not always the happiest people. And so I understand what your spouse is going through, put it that way. And that's why concierge medicine has a beautiful space in the medical world, and also should have a beautiful space in everyone's heart to kind of think about if it's right for you.
Yeah. And our speaker is Dr. Ken Redcross. You can go to drkenredcross.com. I love what, you know, an author and leadership speaker, John Maxwell, said. He said, no one ever wrote a book called Sliding to Success. Going uphill requires intentionality. And he furthermore said, you know, we didn't sign up for easy. You didn't sign up for easy. Medical school isn't easy. Moving in and having a successful, happy, healthy career where, you know, things aren't, and the goal isn't perfection. You know, the goal is progress, little marbles in the cylinder every single day. Like, you know what, next time I'll say this to the patient, but I still did a good job, marble in the bucket. And eventually those marbles add up. And so what advice do you have for those physicians? And our guest is Dr. Ken Redcross. And we're coming in for a landing and a lightning round of questions. So I'm going to throw a grenade in your room there of a couple of questions. What advice for physicians do you have, or their spouses, that, you know, they're wrestling with the tension in the room that says, you know what, when I bump into concierge medicine, I just, you know, I welcome those conversations. I know you do as well. And, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, I've got to do something different, and I'm exploring this as one of the potential options, because, I've had those conversations, as you probably have with your peers. It's, I'm going to quit medicine altogether. I'm going to go help my wife pursue her dream of becoming a florist, and it's like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
that
a
breaks my
big
heart.
give.
That breaks my heart when I hear that sort of thing. Look, guys, and let's be honest here. The main thing I want all of you docs out there who are wrestling with that is to recognize you deserve more.
Yeah.
You went to a school, and we all understand med school is more than 4 years, everyone. It's a journey. Journeys aren't short. That's why they're called journeys, okay? So make sure to recognize that you deserve more. You are not stuck in your space that you feel that you have to be. For some, an employed model is that challenge where you feel like there is no way out. And I don't want any of my colleagues who decided that they wanted to dedicate their lives to patients to feel like they cannot do that because they're not happy with their situation. Because I'm here to tell everyone there is a way out. There's a way to also use your medical degree for so many other things that can allow you to really make sure you live out your purpose. But the point is, you have to recognize that you deserve more. You are not, even though you're an employed model, a lot of us have to get into that model. But the point is that you are a practicing physician that has been given beautiful and wonderful responsibilities, and that only a certain percentage of the United States or the world can be a part of. We are a big group. We are a fraternity and a sorority together. And so the camaraderie is important, but don't ever feel like you're alone and there's nothing that you can do to get out of your situation. Because I'm here to tell you, I've been in those offices. I've been there looking out to say, what do I do? How do I get out of this? How do I make money if I leave this practice? How do I feed my family? I have been there, and I'm here to tell you is that you can absolutely do it.
Oh, I wanted to address that real quick before we jump off the lily pad of entrepreneurship, and that is, we've had many discussions with physicians that wrestle with the idea of their worth, their self-worth. And we talked with a financial planner just yesterday that was helping, giving some insight for physicians leaving medicine. They're at the end of their career, they're retiring, but leaving a legacy or selling the practice is what they're looking forward to. And the concept, the conversation around self-worth, it seems as though many physicians, your colleagues, are being told, like, well, you're not worth that. You're not worth that reimbursement. You're only worth this percentage of Medicare, in the contracts. And, when we talk with physicians and you share your insights, I didn't realize I was worth that. I don't think patients would pay me directly even at all for something like this, because everything should be handled by an insurance contract. So just talk to the self-worth idea of the optimism, the hope, or pour a little bit of water in the glass so it's a little half full for them that says, you're worth more than you think you are.
You are. And as I told you guys already, the glass is always half full for me. I don't believe in the empty theory of that kind of slogan that we sometimes hear, because I'll tell you, you're worth a lot more than you think. The reason why you may not always think that way or feel that way is that we've been doing this all of our lives. As far as we're concerned, yes, we're physicians, but that's good, that's fine, that's what we do. No, we really have a huge service to society, to this world, and quite honestly, to humanity. So you'd be surprised how many patients, and it's so funny, guys, I go through this even to this day. Because as I told you, my practice is small and very niche, but obviously I get asked here and there to figure out things. And I'll try to tell patients that, I'm a little busy and so forth. And they're like, well, I don't care, I'll pay, I have insurance. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what do you do with that? And that's because think about what's going on in healthcare right now. Doctors are kind of, being commoditized in a way from some of these big groups who are treating us like pawns. Just like, oh, we are a revenue generating base, but that we don't have feelings or career aspirations. Patients don't look at us that way, guys. Yeah. When you come in here and you come in with the white coat or what have you, you come in there and you get immediate respect for what's in your brain. What can you bring to them? What can you bring to them for your health? And that means something to patients. So you don't know these things unless you ask, you know what? Would you end up setting up a plan with me that you and your family would pay me $100 a month? just to be there for you guys, just to be there for some phone calls, and maybe I can come over to the house once a month and that sort of thing. And you say, well, $400 or $500 for a small family. You figure that out with 10 to 15 families. Look, guys, baby steps, baby steps. But when you start to put those together, look, you're looking at a guy that started pretty much just like that after a while. I ended up having to be in that employed model for a while until I was able to look in the mirror and understand, like, my worth is a lot more than maybe even I thought that patients would be willing to come out of pocket, because they'll come out of pocket for the access, for the convenience, and more importantly, as I said, for your time. And all three of those are important caveats that patients are looking for now, because guess what's happening during this coronavirus? I've never been any busier. And it's because you'll have some doctor's offices that are closed. You get some doctor's offices that aren't calling patients back. And I understand that it's a bigger animal, but that's a space for us. That's a space for us to pick all of that up and not only create our own business model on the entrepreneurial side of what I do, but also make all those patients happy and bring all of that happiness, your health, and all of your knowledge to them to make them well. So you'd be surprised. You just have to ask, and you'll be surprised at how many of your patients would be more than happy to figure a little carve out. That's exactly what I did. And the next thing, after a while, you're like, I'm getting paid double what I was getting paid in the employed model.
And you're happier.
Yeah. What just happened? And that's something all of us can have happen. I promise you.
Yeah. And you're happier. And you're, there's stress that goes with anything. Another quote from John Maxwell says, author and speaker, he says, anything worth having is going to be a struggle. Commitment doesn't come easy, but when you're fighting for something you believe in, the struggle is worth it. And so our guest today is Dr. Ken Redcross. And we have two more questions for you. And so, first is related to patient expectations. Patients are changing the way that they're connecting. We talked with a telehealth CEO just a couple of weeks ago, another speaker, another session, and we were talking about how the younger generation is approaching healthcare. They're connecting, they're making just different decisions differently. I noticed in my kids, they make decisions differently than what we have been, told or ingrained or educated to do. And so as you look towards the younger generation of physician or the younger generation of patients and their expectations that they place upon healthcare, and, we see that patients are not, valuing their physician relationship. They don't, that used to be the way maybe 40, 50 years ago, where a doctor did come to your home. But like you said, you've been commoditized, you've been dropped in certain pieces on the chessboard to play a role. But we're finding that, retail healthcare is something that is accessible as well. And, patients will go to where they feel heard, seen, and valued. And they want that relationship with a healthcare provider, whether it's in a nurse practitioner, whatever. So how can physicians play that role in their own backyard, not be a superstar everywhere, but be a superstar in their own backyard? As we say a lot around here, it's not about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. How do they become more for their patients?
So look, let me tell you, you're right, Michael. This is an interesting thing, because as I deal with different patients and different demographics, it's very specific, right? When you're talking about some of the millennials and so forth, you're right. It's not always, as I talk about those 4 tenets where I think all of the patient-doctor bond is really founded on, look at those things. The trust is fine. That always makes sense for them. But when you talk about the younger folks, it's really about that communication. And then one of my other things that I talked about access. Because they come in, they're digital, they want to come in. So that's different. But even with that population, when you deal with the older patients, you're right, that bond is so much more important. As I always say, and this is for all of the patients, even the young ones, everything is good until it isn't. And so it's those times to when our value and our worth really start to get extrapolated, when we're able to put the pieces together to help a young patient who, they're the young invincibles, but things happen. And it's when we fill in those gaps because of our relationships, because of the time that we can give to them to help them through this challenging diagnosis for themselves or for their parent. So even though you're right, there's a lot of different things happening in healthcare where you're starting to kind of decrease to some people the worth of the doctor, it'll never happen. It'll never happen as long as we put the focus where it matters most, which is the patient, and giving them something that we know we can give that on average, as I mentioned in my book, at the point you're getting 7.5 minutes with your doctor. Contrast that to me when I was with a patient yesterday or a couple of days ago for almost an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes, kind of working through some things with her and her aide and that sort of thing. So that's value, guys. Yeah. That is the importance of what we actually do. So those other places are going to make their money, but don't forget, that's a revenue model. We're talking about a spiritual model.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're talking about a model that not only completes the patient's, guys, but it's our medicine. It's medicine for me each and every day. So what we do is different, but you know what? They have their place and that's all right. But you know what? I don't need but so much to be happy. As long as my little world of people that I'm fortunate and blessed enough to impact, whether it's in their home or whether it's on television on any of the networks, that's my network, that's my group for the time. And if I can impact them, I'm doing enough.
And our guest today, our speaker, as we come in for a landing, is Dr. Ken Redcross. We have one more question for him, and really it has a kind of a couple of parts. And number one, I want you to share your Columbia story with us. But you know, as we look forward to the future, we put 2020 in the rearview mirror. We've heard many physicians, I think even one just this week, you know, the pandemic is kind of a 2-year thing maybe. And it's probably going to be, how do we cure fear? You know, it was a conversation we had with another colleague of yours just a couple of days ago, as you know, how do we get people more comfortable going back out to restaurants, and you know, but in the meantime trying to remain safe and give people comfort. You know, as we say, we're social distancing before it was cool. And you know, as you look back on what you've accomplished with Redcross Communications and Dr. Ken Redcross, you know, on the mobile side, if you were to hang it all up, you know, and say, you know what, I'm going to go become a florist in Alaska. Say that's your big dream. I don't know. If you were to think about one story, and I know that I asked this of all of our speakers, you know, think about one story that comes to mind that says, you know what, I could retire happy knowing that this is exactly why that last patient, that's why we do this.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions there. Sorry.
Yeah, I can tell you guys, I think, you know, for me, and you're right, you know, I've thought about this a lot because, you know, so much about life is, you know, we're none of us necessarily guaranteed tomorrow. So what is that thing? What is that thing that, like you said, would make me feel like that I've done everything I can? And I felt that for obviously when I spent my time at Columbia, as far as just for my training, because back then, guys, Columbia by far had one of the most malignant programs as far as it was on another level. But I was very thankful, grateful for that because it prepared me for anything. But as far as my experience, and I have to say, was my time that I spent in Guatemala. And I went there with a group called the Vitamin Angels, and we went there to provide vitamins to those small villages. And something so simple, guys, is just vitamins, health, and wellness. I mean, look, a lot of us kind of have that feeling, like you mentioned before in the interview, Michael, as far as what our heart is, but you don't understand when you're there and you see the smile of that person, and you really didn't feel like you did that much, but it didn't take anything for what we're able to do. And that's what life is about. It's about others. And once you finally get to that realization, man, like I said, every day for me is, like I said, I couldn't have asked for a better life. And that just kind of is the cherry on the top for me. As far as this virus situation, you know, I was on a show the other day, and one of the things that I think we have to recognize is that it doesn't matter what side of the aisle that any of us are on watching and listening to this, because I'll tell you one thing, this virus, guess what? It's agnostic. It doesn't care whether you're blue or if you're red. So this is something that we have to all come together as a society, do the smart thing, and recognize you got to get through this, and then we can live to fight another day. as to see what side of the aisle you want to be on. But now's not the time in order to do this. And the best way we can do this is, once again, together. This moment of unity is really, really necessary. And you're right. We talk about things such as the social distancing now, the mask and hand washing. And this is something that, if there's one thing that comes out of this pandemic, is that who knows what really a human health will be going forward with these three things that we've never really talked about as much. So, if there's anything to think about with this pandemic, it's important for us to kind of pick those things that we can utilize to make sure that we improve all of our health, and for all of us, and for humanity, for all of our loved ones especially.
Absolutely. And we were talking with a physician the other day. She's a surgeon, and she said, I was at a restaurant, and there was a father and a daughter, and the father was waiting outside the restaurant for his little girl, and she's maybe 6. And she kind of came out really worried and kind of frantic in the hallway of the restaurant with the father. And she's like, I couldn't wash my hands for 20 seconds because there wasn't any soap left in the dispenser. And it was like that kind of, proud of, we're teaching these young kids, how much, yes, we'll have to deal with obesity and heart issues and, the results of quarantining. But, the younger generation is looking at this and being like, they've never washed our kids, our teenagers have never washed their hands so much in their lives.
I have 2 at home, so I have to battle that. So
yes,
you're right. It's not easy. So I'm fighting the good fight too.
Yes. So our guest has been Dr. Ken Redcross. You have an inspiring story, and we want to thank you for being here. You're truly the epitome of a top doctor in concierge medicine. You are showing the world and your patients in your local community that it's not about being the best doctor in the world. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. Thank you for your journey, your story.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on. And all of you watching and listening, thank you as well, because this is an important message to get out, and I feel fortunate to be
great
here.
Time to take a 30 or 60-second break and let you
Got
know
a
about
feeling deep in my soul, ain't no secret, 'cause everybody knows. I got a feeling I just can't hide, burning brightly, you see it in my eyes.
He is going to teach us how to create an ice pack, right?
So if you
Everything's gonna be alright. Ooh, now you're making me feel. Ooh, now you're making me feel. Ooh, now you're making me feel. Everything's gonna be alright. Here in my heart, just believe it. Knew it from the start.